Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited to be here today to introduce our SGS webinar for software as a medical device under the MDR. My name is Daniel Fisher. I'm the Regional Sales Manager for the Medical Division. Your speaker today is Kevin Holoquist. Kevin is our Director of Technical Assessment for Medical Devices, and he's located in the Boston area. SGS is the world's leading inspection, testing, and verification certification company. We have over 98,000 employees in over 2,600 locations all around the world, expertise in 11 global industry sectors. We provide assistance and expertise with global support and services that cater to all industries. We are the largest provider of audits, certification, training, and advisory services. We have the ability to turn your needs into comprehensive solutions. With a consistent service delivery via our worldwide network and global footprint. We have highly experienced quality and regulatory experts in the medical device and certification area, ready to offer training to you from our SGS Academy. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a link for you to view our SGS Academy offerings. And as well, there will be a Q&A. Please put all of your questions in the chat box, and we will discuss those questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you for joining us today. And to start, I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Good afternoon and good morning. So my name is Kevin Holoquist, and today we are going to be talking our way through software as a medical device and some of the pitfalls that are particularly common to software as a medical device. But first, let me warn you that there are questions throughout and quizzes. And once upon a time, a lifetime ago, I used to be a professor, so I will wait for the class to answer me. And I want to start the first one with trying to understand where everybody is in their medical device journey. So the first questions are up, and it is essentially, where are you in your medical device journey? Ranging from, I'm completely new at this, I just want to understand what is the MDR, to I kind of know what it is, we're going to start working soon, we're working on it, we're almost done with it, and I've been done for a while, when can I get on your I want to work on this list? So why doesn't everybody go ahead and start filling in there where you are at? I see a handful of people have already started, but I'll wait another moment and see if anyone else wants to put in their answers. Again, this will just help me kind of know, where are you in your medical device journey? You know, what is an MDR? We're working on MDR and we're done with MDR. You know, where are you at? Give it another few seconds. Okay. We're going to start. We're going to start. We are starting, and we're almost done. So that's actually a really good cross section. When it's I don't know what MDR is yet, and when it's where can we submit. Sometimes I always worry that maybe the things I'm going to teach you, you might have missed already. So we're going to start with, is my device a medical device? For software, it's actually not always 100% clear whether or not your device is a medical software device. And when we want to know whether or not our device is medical under the MDR, we of course go to the definitions, because a legal manufacturer must always declare and document on or in the device that it's a medical device. When we say labeling for software, usually we're talking about your about screen or your loading screen. Somewhere you have to make this declaration, use the standardized label symbol, MD, and say you're a medical device. But if you say you are, how do you know you are? And the answer comes from MDR, Article 2, first subsection 1. It's the definition of a medical device, which I won't read at you. For software in particular, a lot of these are not going to be software. For software, we're most likely going to be seeing those underlined pieces. A medical device that is software, either used alone or in combination. So many medical devices that are software are used in combination with another device. By themselves, they wouldn't be software, but they're an accessory. Very frequently, they are diagnosis, monitoring, prediction, and prognosis. Software by itself doesn't typically treat, although it can for certain disease states or disabilities, particularly ones that involve mental disabilities, are considered to be treatment for many softwares. So when we're looking at your device, we need to understand, what do you diagnose, what do you monitor, what do you predict, and what do you prognose? Most importantly, and I want to point this out, a lot of this comes out of, what do you as a legal manufacturer claim? The oldest example in the world is a treadmill. So a treadmill that is in someone's basement or in your local gym is not a medical device. But the exact same treadmill, now used as part of a stress test for a heart doctor, is now a medical device. Nothing has changed. It's the same physical object. All that changed is that someone said, I am making a claim medically that this is a medical device. Now, when we're looking, let's actually take a step back for a moment. Before we start stepping into our examples, let me take a step back. A lot of people will use the word diagnosis or monitoring slightly incorrectly. So I will point everybody at MDCG 2021-24. There are definitions on page 43 and on page 12 for what is the meaning of diagnosis and what is the meaning of monitoring and measurement. Measurement is the same old standard that it was under MDD, if you've been doing this for a while, where the device either is directly measuring an anatomical parameter of some fashion, or it's displaying an energy delivery or a substance delivery. It displays it in SI units, and there is an implied accuracy, meaning if it's not accurate, if what's on the screen is untrue, there's medical consequences. Many people who use software or generate software might say to themselves, I'm not diagnosis. The doctor diagnoses. I just give him information to diagnose. I don't diagnose. The doctor diagnoses. She will do the diagnosis. But that's not true. When you look at page 43, diagnosis is defined as inclusive of information presented to the end user with which the end user will make a diagnosis. So when you are thinking your way through, am I a medical device? Be very careful with the word monitoring. Be very careful with the word diagnosis. It may apply to you even when you don't think it does. So let's take this treadmill example and start moving forward through a couple of, am I a medical device? So the first software as a medical device one, is a smartphone application, something that we're all very familiar with. Its core function is that it is going to track cycles, ovulation, and menstruation symptoms. It makes a very specific claim. It says it's going to suggest fertility windows. So my question to you is this a medical device? So either A, you believe this is a medical device, or B, you believe this is not a medical device. So again, this is a software application on a cell phone. This software application is going to take data in from its user and is going to track ovulation status. It's going to track menstruation status. Maybe it has a bunch of other things, your body temperature, which maybe you will take. It's going to make a decision, and it's going to say, I believe you are or are not fertile at this moment in time. So we have some answers starting to come in. I'll wait another minute or two. Well, another moment or two. And by all means, debate amongst yourselves at your sites or in your rooms or in the chat. Good. It's like we got most people. So I'm going to click on, let's see. I am a medical device. Yes, you are. It is indeed. It is for a very specific investigation and measurement of a physiological process. In fact, not only is it, there's a whole entire rule for how you would particularly give it a classification. Great. Now let's take the exact same medical device. Absolutely nothing has changed. It is going to track the exact same thing in the exact same way on the exact same phone. It now makes a claim. Information for general wellness. So now I'm going to ask you the same question. Is this a medical device? So again, yes, this is a medical device, or no, this isn't. Nothing's changed. Same exact device, different claim. Oh, first brave person has answered. And then 6 people followed suit. And again, it's important to think through that definition of a medical device. Are you diagnosing? Are you prognosing? Are you treating? What is it doing? That's why claims are so important to us. It lets us know whether or not we should be wasting your time and money looking at it in the first place. Good. It looks like we have kind of the majority, so I'm going to skip on over. Some say I am. Most say I am not. Okay. The answer is almost certainly no. It's not actually a medical device. General health and wellness, it's not a never. Again, I'm always very careful with hardcore no's and yeses, but almost never is general wellness a medical device. It's very hard to have a clinical indication where you can demonstrate evidence for something like general wellness. So the answer is this one would not be considered a medical device. So let's go to another one. I want to run through a few more of these. Still a smartphone application. Why am I sticking with smartphone? Or put it on a tablet or on a computer screen. Doesn't matter to me where it is, but it's just on a screen. Again, this is software only, and we're used to working on our phones these days. Now it's a mental health chatbot. This is not theoretical. These objects now exist, even ignoring the LLM models that have lawsuits against them these days. So not those. There are professional medical ones that now will converse with the user, give mood tracking, might guide meditation, cognitive behavioral therapy advice, tell people what to do, how to think about their situation. It makes a very specific claim, which is reduction in depression. So is this a medical device? Again, yes, it is, or no, it isn't. There we go. Some brave souls answering. Many brave souls. So, of course, at the core of this question is something that I touched on very briefly, which is depression a medically diagnosable disease state or state? The answer is it is. And so the European Union absolutely does consider treatment of clinical depression to be a medical device. So this is a software instrument that would in fact be considered a medical device. So the answer to the majority, congratulations, is yes. This software is for investigation, monitoring, treatment, and alleviation of a disease or disability. Depending on where exactly you go looking up things such as clinical depression, sometimes it's called a disease state, sometimes it is called a disability, but it is recognized in the EU as falling under the MDR. Let's do one more. So this one, software device 4, it duplicates data which is found on a primary monitor. So the image I have is an example. It doesn't necessarily have to be that exact one. It might be non-invasive blood pressure, it might be invasive blood pressure, could be pulse, could be ECG, and it is displaying it somewhere else. Maybe it's on the doctor's phone, perhaps it is at a nurse's station in the center round of a hospital. So same question, is it a medical device or isn't it? No specific claims made, it's just duplicating the data. And I'll give you a hint, this is a hard one. This is a hard question. I don't know if that's much of a hint. Okay, we're getting past half. That's good. Give another moment for everyone else to try. Wow, 50-50. I love it. All right, let's talk about it. So the answer is probably not. So I made no claim. If you look inside the MDCG 2021-24, which I've referenced a handful of times already, This is actually a specific example that's given inside that MDCG, which says that if it is duplication of data with no processing at all, the answer is it is not considered generally a medical device. So at the end of the day, let's think for a moment. So if you've ever worked remotely and maybe you have a extra monitor, basic HDMI connection, and bam, it just duplicates what's on the screen next to you. This is running the actual program. This one is duplicating it. We all sort of know this. Is this a medical device that sits next to it? Why do I say this one's on the edge? Because then there's the question of, is it an accessory? An accessory for a medical device, as defined, while not being itself a medical device, is intended by the manufacturer to be used together with one or several medical devices. The most common example of a device that's a non-software, many times legal manufacturers will have a hardware station platform. It holds everything else. And you plug your RF generators, microwave generators, X-ray generators into it. Something that's just, it's a power station and a stand. If it's a commercial off the shelf, the answer is that that is an accessory, which is not a medical device. It is not intended by its manufacturer to be used with medical devices. If that same legal manufacturer places it on the market and intends it to be used with their devices for that purpose, now it's a medical device and therefore an accessory. So this starts getting really right on the edge of, it depends on how you phrase it, how you market it. So let's make it a little bit more. Same exact device. Nothing's changed about its actual software. Not a line of code is different. But now the marketing team has made the claim it reduces the time to treatment for patients. Exact same device, new claim. Is this a medical device? And I forgot to put a question sheet in, so I'll just let you think about it for a minute for yourself, because I'm not going to be able to put a questionnaire up, and then I'll give the answer. So think to yourself, same device, is this one a medical device? And I'll let everyone contemplate that for a moment. The answer is yes. Once you start making that very explicit claim, that you are going to clinically reduce the time to treatment for a patient, you're absolutely now inside of the medical device space. So this is sort of like the treadmill example. Over in the corner, duplicating data, making no claim, not intended to be used in that way, not a medical device. Same exact software with a medical claim, now you're a medical device. Okay, so now we're starting to get a handle on what is a medical device, right? We're starting to understand that. So the next step is, what classification is your software? So of course, when we talk about software, there's always two types of classifications that we might be talking about. There is 62304's definition of class A, B, and C. That's not in scope today and not what we're going to be discussing. Although I do want to mention, be sure that your risk management file supports the statement. Remember the definitions of class A, which is that harm is not possible. If we look at your risk management file and we find that harm is in fact possible, then you're not class A. Why is it a big deal? If you think you're class B, but you're actually class C, that's not the biggest deal. Some extra documentation is required, but it's not the end of the world. If you think you're class A, but you are class B or C, it is a large number of deliverables that change. So look very carefully at your risk management file and your claimed classification. Now let's move over to MDR classification. So of course we have class 1, 1M, 1R. You can't really have a class 1R software, so I didn't put it. 1S, can't have a class 1S software, so I didn't put it. 2A, 2B, and 3. So how do you know? The answer is, whenever we review it, and every notified body needs to see a full breakdown of Annex 8 and all of the rules under review. And the highest rule is always the one that's applied to the device. So everyone's used to looking at these. I want to give you some insight into how a notified body looks at this. So if we see someone say, I'm Rule 9, Class 2B, that doesn't tell me that you know why. Because if you start looking at this, you'll see there's more than one way inside of Rule 9 to be Class 2B. Now, you're software only. And people might be thinking, well, I can't be Rule 9 or Rule 10. I'm software. That's what Rule 11 is for. But multiple rules can apply to one device. So it's important to read them through. Let's take Rule 9. All active devices intended to control, or monitor the performance of an active therapeutic Class 2B device or directly influence the performance of such a device. It is absolutely possible for a software-only device to be the control for the performance of an active therapeutic 2B device. So the answer is, just because you're software only doesn't mean Rule 9 wouldn't apply to you. Similarly for Rule 10, we talked a little bit before, when you look at the definitions on page 43 and page 12 of the 2021-24 MDCG, you'll find it's very easy for software to be diagnosis and monitoring. So it is very easy for Rule 10 to apply to the device. And we would need to see you go through those rules and apply them in turn so that we understand how you're applying them. Of course, Rule 11 always applies, it's software. So let's start looking again at some examples. So everyone here clicked on them. They are familiar with the MDR. You're either working or nearly done. So let's do some examples here. What class am I? So this is the same device we were talking about before. It's the same database to track cycles of ovulation and menstruation symptoms, and it still has the clinical claim of suggesting a fertility window. So we know for a fact that we said that this is a medical device. I'll give you a hint. You might want to have your MDR out, and you might want to go to Annex 8 real quick, unless you're really good and you have all of these memorized. My question to you is, what rules apply? So the answer might be any one of these, because you'll notice I put Rule 11 in all of them. I'll give everyone a little bit more time because I don't know that everyone sits around memorizing the MDR and all of the rules, although I hope you do. One brave soul has submitted an answer. These are always difficult to answer, especially because I'll freely admit I'm not giving you all of the information. I'm not telling you the details of exactly how the device works. I'm not telling you everything that is displayed on the screen. Where does it get the information from? And these things all absolutely will impact the classification and the rules that apply to a device. So if you feel like you're making a guess in a kind of partially blind world, you're absolutely right. But if it makes you feel any better, we do that all the time too. We think we know what your device does. We don't really know until we start reviewing your technical documentation package. So I feel your pain. We're getting there. People are starting to give some answers. I'll give it a little bit more time. We're still ticking in. Maybe we'll give you some sympathy for your notified body assessors too, that we have to figure this out every time we see a new device. Always remember that you know your device better than we do. Yeah, there we go. While you're thinking, let me give that for everyone who's not working on the question. The single best piece of advice I can give for everybody to any notified body that you ever submit to, always remember that we have a very small number of days with your technical file compared to how many days you've had your technical file. So always assume that we are not as familiar with the device, not as familiar with the documentation. Always assume that compared to you, we are ignorant, because the answer is, in many ways, we are. We're doing our best. All right, we're getting there. We're over 50. I'm going to tick over and see what everyone thought. So we've got a good range on this. So somebody said yes to all of them. So probably a little difficult because I put Rule 11 with everybody's. And the answer is absolutely, Rule 11 does apply. Then the next rules, let's start going through them together. Right? So of course the answer is Rule 11, software which is intended to provide information. So the answer is, how do we look at this? I want to give you a little bit of an insight. Knowing what we know of this device, how does my brain or any assessor's brain look at this rule and parse it? As I read through, my brain is saying yes and no. So you'll sort of see this color coding for how I'm looking at it. Software intended to provide information. Okay, yes, used to make decisions with diagnosis, therapeutic purposes. So yeah, it's Class 2A, except So my brain's like, okay, yes, it's software, it's in the bucket, so I'm at least 2A. Except death or irreversible. As soon as I see death and I see this device type, my brain just reads it out. The answer is just no. There's no death here, not class 3. Serious deterioration of a person's state of health, my brain's just dismissing the clause. The answer for this one is a very clear no. If the device didn't exist at all, which is a question that we're going to come back to a few times in this presentation. What if the device just didn't exist? That's okay. We're okay with the device not existing. Nothing's going to happen that is harmful. Software intended to monitor a physiological process. So we already said that that is a physiological process. So I say, great. Yes, it's great. Is it a vital physiological parameter? The answer is no. When we think that, we're thinking stroke volume variation, pulse, body temperature, immediate danger to the patient. No. So Rule 11, absolutely yes, class 2A. The next one is Rule 15. So for everyone who said Rule 11 and Rule 15, congratulations. That is the answer that I believe that this device to fall under. All devices used for contraception. So prediction of a cycle, either for intended contraception or for intended impregnation, in both cases would fall under Rule 15. So is it applicable? The answer is almost certainly yes. Unfortunately, I wrote the indication for use when I did this in a deliberately questionable way. I put the word suggests. Suggests is such a loosey-goosey word. It depends on what you write in your clinical evaluation assessment. But the answer is, in general, yes, it does apply. The other place, of course, to look that is very important, I like to joke that MDCG 2019-11, which essentially guides Rule 11, could almost be reduced to this table. I'm not saying you shouldn't read the whole thing, but boy, this is a very important table. Remember the definitions inside of it for critical, serious, and non-serious. So they will tell you very clearly where exactly you want to be inside of this. So let's take this definition. We're going to look at another example here, okay? So surgical planning software. This is becoming very common. It's common now in dental. It's common in pre-surgical. It's common in orthopedics. It's common in clinical treatment of cancers. This is a very common device, some form of surgical planning software. And the classification might say it cannot cause serious harm. Why? People will say, well, it's not doing anything itself. It's not directly doing anything. And it seems that way, but then you look at the risk management file and it says an error in the software algorithm might result in either wrong tissue removal, additional surgical intervention, or something of the nature of incorrect radiation delivery. So that's an example where you might have to deal with, is it still class 2A? You yourself have to now go through this table. So let's look at this example, right? So the first thing you want to do is it critical, is it serious, or is it non-serious? So originally we're told it's class 2A, all the way, non-serious, right? Nothing can happen. But the risk management file says surgical intervention, additional. That falls under the definition of a serious. So we know we're definitely in this second row. So either it's 2B or 2A. So once you know it's 2B or 2A, you now have to start asking yourself, does the software directly treat or directly diagnose? In the case of this example of surgical planning software, the answer is it doesn't. So now you have to ask yourself, does it drive clinical management or does it inform clinical management? Now, in the case of a serious situation, you'll find in both cases you land at class 2A. It won't matter for this particular one. For many devices, it does. Whether it drives management or informs management, there is no strict definition of these two objects. So I can't say to you, go look at the following MDCG, the definition is right here. This is very much dependent upon available data and what is the workflow in the use. So we will care a lot exactly how the software is used, where exactly is it used, and how the doctors or the clinical staff interact with it. For is it really driving the management and they're not really going to get a lot of data from other locations, or they have a very data-rich environment and this is one piece and it just informs the clinical management. So again, claims are everything. So in summary of this section, remember your device classification has to be supported by your risk. It must consider all the rules. You must look at the MDCG 2019-11 to get it right for software. And technical function alone doesn't make you a medical device. It's the claim that really impacts you. So next, I want to talk about software as medical devices clinical data. Clinical data, whether you are software or anything for that matter, is the #1 failure mode across the world, across all notified bodies for why people cannot get a certificate. It is extremely important, and it is huge. 1/3 of the MDR is dedicated to clinical or post-market surveillance in some fashion. And of all the MDCGs added and mashed together, there's somewhere between 500 and 700 pages of clinical evaluation guidance. So it is very important under the MDR. Do you need clinical evidence? Let me start with the most basic sentence that I can say. Please remember that we're secondary to you, and we don't always know everything you know coming into it, so have mercy on us. The second most important thing I will say today is you are probably not Article 6110. Let me say that again. You are not Article 6110. The odds of you being 6110 are outstandingly low. Article 6110, which we'll get into in a moment, is you do not need clinical evidence. You have no clinical benefit. It is outstandingly rare for a medical device to be Article 6110. I would say approximately 10% of all legal manufacturers try that route. Far less than 1 in 100 of those actually are that route. It is very rare. Now, let's start talking about what constitutes clinical evidence. What kind of evidence do you have for SaMD, which actually there's a special kind that only software usually has access to, and how does it relate to your PMCF plan? So, do you need clinical evidence? The answer is yes, one way or another. Now or later, you need one. Even under the rare condition that you are Article 6110, which is the same as the old MDD Annex 1011D, also known as a preclinical route, you cannot remain on the market by means of this. You have to get clinical data eventually. So your PMCF plan must ultimately identify how are you going to gather clinical data for your device. So again, definitions are very important. When we're looking at clinical evidence, two things that are very important are intended purpose and indication for use. All devices have an intended purpose. Not every device has an indication for use, although most do. Certainly most softwares do. Back in radio frequency ablation land, let's use that as a very easy example. An intended purpose is what the device is intended to do. Think of the indication for use as why you're doing it. An RF ablation generator or probe's intended purpose is I'm going to deliver RF energy. Then the indication for use is why. RF energy for carpal tunnel, RF energy for spinal delivery for reduction in pain, RF ablation energy for delivery to the liver for treatment of cancer. Same probe, same RF energy, different indication for use. Why does it matter? Because we need to see clinical data in support of the indication for use. So take a software device. I display data XYZ. Why? Ask yourself the question, why? So it's very important that we do that. The next portion is, what is the definition of clinical data? That is thankfully defined. It is a clinical investigation of the device, or it is a clinical investigation of the device from literature for a device for which the equivalence is demonstrated. We'll get more to equivalence in a moment. It's also reports in peer-reviewed scientific literature or clinically relevant post-market surveillance data. I love the following definition. This is a much more straightforward way to think of it. Clinical data, if the answer to all of these is yes, then it is clinical data. It's the device under review, used in the environment intended to be used in, by its intended users, for its intended purpose, on the intended patient population. If the answer is yes to all of these, then the answer is it is clinical data. So what do you need? Claims. Medical device claims will always include your indication for use and your intended purpose. And you do have to prove those, but you also have to have a benefit statement. So a clinical benefit is going to be what is the positive impact to the patient. So again, benefit is defined inside of Article 2 of the MDR. We always have to see proof that that is there. So where do we go looking for your claims? Where do we go looking for your benefit statements? The answer is the instructions for use, the website, public brochures, YouTube, and public-facing locations. And it is very important that all of these agree in the content and the intent. So we look through all of these to make sure they are in, not kind of seem the same, not they're really close, not they're almost the same, They must be verbatim. Everywhere that they are stated, they must be the same where they fall under the CE mark. So let's get to a more complex question. You are a legal manufacturer or contract manufacturer, and the legal manufacturer of the device has a YouTube video, and that video is available in the EU. So you have a brochure that says indication for use B. There's no clinical data for it, right? All the clinical data is for indication for use A. But that's, you put that on your website. That's okay because it's not a company-sponsored website, right? It's just YouTube. Is that okay? Can you do that? It's just YouTube. YouTube doesn't count. A couple people are answering. But YouTube is worldwide. What if I just meant the Americans to see it? Okay. This is not okay. 100% of you are 100% right. So the answer is it is not okay. So let's start talking a little bit more about benefit. Clinical benefit is defined as the positive impact expressed with meaningful, measurable, patient-relevant outcomes. I'm going to give an example that I didn't think to put into the slides directly about what does it mean for something to be measurable. And I want everyone here to think about either your child, yourself, a young friend who is learning to drive. And they say to you, I am a good driver. Or maybe your spouse, I don't know. Someone says to you, I am a good driver. What does that mean? It's not specific. It's not measurable. You can't really prove it. You can't really disprove it. Now someone says to you, I'm a good driver. I don't get into many car accidents. Now we're starting to be meaningful, but that's still not measurable. What does not many mean? Now someone says to you, I'm a good driver. I don't get into more than one car accident per month. It's meaningful, it's measurable. We can agree whether or not that happens. Then we get into the more complex question of, does it still make you a good driver or not? Now that's where we start getting into state of the art, which we'll discuss in a moment. Now maybe you have an unusual child who comes to you and says, Mom, Dad, I'm a good driver. I don't get into very many car accidents. I get into less than one car accident for every 18,255 miles. Comparing that to my region, my gender, and my age, that's considered below average. I don't get into more than the average number of car accidents. Therefore, I'm a good driver. That's specific, it's measurable, it's meaningful, and you have a very unusual child. And that's awesome. But it's also completely what we're looking for when we read your benefit statements. If I can't disprove you, you can't prove you. That's the best way to look at it. So let's start looking at some examples. And again, some more questions, because clearly I like questions. So we have a device, an RF probe for the delivery of radio frequency energy for the ablation of soft and hard tissue. Is this a clinical benefit? Is this a clinical benefit? Yay or nay? Standard RF probe. Sorry, I know it's not a software example, but trust me, it translates. No brave souls. There we go. I once had a classroom of students ask, like, how long would I wait for like someone to answer if no one answered? And I was like, forever. I got time. Also, I once had them ask me if no one ever showed up to class, would I keep teaching? And the answer was oddly yes. They're just me and a blackboard. Give it a few more seconds. split. 75% true, 75% false. This is false. This is not a clinical benefit and would not be accepted. It's attribute measurable. You can determine whether or not you've delivered radiofrequency energy. It's not specific and it's not patient-facing. I said it's for ablation of soft and hard tissue. I did not tell you why. This is a technical performance. Ablation of soft and hard tissue for the reduction in pain, and then you define how much pain or perhaps quality of life. Delivery of RF energy to soft tissue for the reduction in lesion size. That's a specific benefit. It's patient-facing. This comes down to our original piece of this conversation of intended use versus intended purpose. Delivery of RF energy is technical. It's a thing you do, but it doesn't tell me why. This is not considered to be a clinical benefit. Let's try another one. Software tracking for client mood and dietary habit. Is this a clinical benefit? It's software that tracks your mood and what you're eating. In fact, I have one on my phone. My phone is off, so I can't off the top of my head remember its name, but I have one of these. So think to yourself about the definition that we have given for intended purpose, intended use, and clinical benefit. More seconds. All right, we swung some of you. Let's see what the answer is. The answer is still no. It's still attribute measurable. It's technical. You know whether or not it's tracking the mood. It's not specific and it's not patient-facing. This is still a technical performance and not a clinical benefit. Why are you tracking their mood? Why are you tracking their dietary habit? What is the clinical benefit to the patient of doing this? So let's throw you another one. So now it's the same software, but it's got a little extra. Tracking client mood, dietary habits to reduce the total time a patient self-reports being sad or in a depressed state. So now is it a clinical benefit? Think back to our car and driving example. A few seconds. Good. The answer is yes. Now this is starting to be into a clinical benefit. It's measurable. It's not fully specific, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Why is it not fully specific? So you're saying it reduced total time a patient spends in a reported depressed state. Against what? Compared to what? That's perfectly valid. You might have to hammer out the determined performance a little bit more, but I would consider this to be a benefit. Usually it would be something more in the vein, now that I think about it, oh, I did say reduce. Great. To reduce total time spent. So you're tracking it to help reduce a thing that is considered a deleterious effect. So in summary, to get started here for clinical evidence, you have to absolutely have your indication for use and intended purpose, what it does, why it does it. Think to yourself the question, if the device is gone from the market, what is the negative side to the patient? The opposite of that answer is your benefit statement. Not just your device, just the whole device type. If tomorrow there were no SpO2 sensors, what's the negative? Then you find yourself knowing what the benefit is, because now you've taken the benefit away by making it not there. It must be specific and measurable. Think to that young driver telling you that they're safe. Okay. Next question for clinical data is, how do you prove it? You've made a clinical benefit claim, and now you have to prove that you meet it. So that's the next step. What data do you need? What kind and how much? So we're all sort of familiar with this idea. We all sort of know what's good data and what's bad data. You know, expert opinions, if you've never sat in on when someone makes an expert opinion panel, it's real loose. It's a bunch of people kind of going, this seems right to me. Is this right to you? It's really not very scientific at all, actually. Case studies, single case studies. They're one example. It's a good reason to think something might happen, but you need to go get better data. Cohort studies, randomized trials. Now you have groups of people. It's a deliberate group of studies. Then you have the systematic reviews and meta-analysis where you have studies of multiple studies, where you're now trying to see what is the state of science in general. So we all know that there is this tier of how data works. MDCG 2020-6, clinical evidence for previously CE marked devices, codifies it, gives it a rank system, and it defines what they are. And more or less, this follows that pyramid. I highly recommend you become very familiar with 2020-6. This will give you an example of what you need. There are some very strict rules. If you're class 3, you have to have rank 1 through 4. But for everybody else, it gets a little bit more complex. So, how much is enough? Everybody wants to know the magical number. Do I need 95% confidence? Do I need 99? Do I need 1,000 data points? Do I need 100? It always depends upon what you are claiming. And so we can't give you a statement. No notified body can. You need to do this much. There's no such object. You're always comparing yourself. Remember we gave that example of state of the art. That kid who comes to you and says, I'm a good driver, I get into 1 car accident a month. We all know in our gut that that's not a good driver. Why? I don't know. That seems like a lot of accidents to me. And so we're looking at that number, we're going, that's not state of the art. The exact same thing here. Part of doing an MDR CE review is to look at, CER review, is to look at state of the art and determine what the rest of the market is doing. If you have a sensitivity specificity of 60-60 and the whole market has 80-80, you probably need more evidence. You're not good enough. You're not state of the art yet. So that's how we're looking at it. Evidence has to be proportional to the device claims, the type, the novelty. If I see somebody who says I have the cure for death, which if everyone might recall or might not, Google said they would cure death within 10 years, something like 6 years ago. I'm waiting. I still feel like I'm going to die someday. I don't think they've finished that. I want them to finish their longitudinal studies before I need it. We're going to need follow-up data and a really large number of them on a very wide cohort. We all sort of know that. Something like I provide SpO2 values for accurate determination of hypoxia. You don't need a lot of data. You don't need very high rank data. So what you need and what you need to prove, there's no single answer other than the last bullet point that is here. You have to benchmark against state of the art. And then you have to derive your claims and measurables from state of the art. So you have to do a literature search or in some way gather data that is repeatable and measurable for what does the market look like for other devices that are like yours or in the same space as yours. Then you have to prove to me that you meet those same as good or better. And if you want to get mathematical, not inferior or not non-inferior. So what kind of evidence can you use? Nothing's changed since moving into MDR. There's still 4 routes. Clinical evidence for the device under review, clinical evidence for an equivalent, a mix of those two, or preclinical evidence, which we kind of already nixed. That's the 6110, super rare. What do we get for devices that are yours? Maybe you've done a clinical investigation. Awesome. Maybe you have literature on your device. Excellent. Maybe it's post-market surveillance data, vigilance, complaints, and questionnaires. That's low rank data. If you go to the 2020-6, that's going to be ranked 9. It's low, but it's still data. SaMD has a very special route that almost no other device has, and that's retrospective clinical data. What does that mean? If you have software whose purpose is to analyze something, ECGs, EKGs, EEGs, or whatever, stroke volume variations, slew of other data, and it makes a diagnosis prognosis from it. Does that data have to come from real-time clinical investigation, or can you go to a database of redacted patient data and do a retrospective clinical data. It is possible that you can. That's something that physical devices broadly can't do because software is agnostic to where the data is coming from. It doesn't understand in its I/O whether that's a real patient hooked up to it or whether it is not. So you have an additional, it's still the same type of data. It's not a new route to conformity, but you have an additional data stream that is available to software only that is considered clinical data. But what you really have to take into account very carefully is when in the workflow is the software used. If the software is used very midstream and what's happening with the patient in real time matters a lot, then the usability influences the flow of surgery in real time. Now retrospective data is very hard to pitch because how it is affecting the patient in real time, it may not be representative of clinical use. It doesn't mean it's useless. It doesn't mean you can't present it, but it means it may not be enough to stand alone, and you may need additional post-market clinical follow-up after you reach the market for additional data. But it is a route that's available to software that's fairly unique. Then you have equivalency. So you might have evidence on an equivalent device through clinical literature on that equivalent device, or post-market surveillance data on that equivalent device that belongs to you. Maybe it's a previous version, or similar software that performs the same function. On equivalence, please read the MDCG 2020-5. It is a very strictly interpreted MDCG. The notified bodies have had many conversations with the commission over the interpretation of the equivalency MDCG. Where it says similar, similar means similar. Where it says same, same means same. Truly identical, and we are not allowed a great deal of wiggle. Now, you will notice that it says similar, such as software algorithms. That can be very hard to prove if you don't have access to the data because it's a different legal manufacturer. If core algorithms have changed, equivalency starts getting very hard to prove. You may need a functional test, which is a valid method of proving equivalence between two softwares. You may need a functional test that the output at a black box level is the same. But other things that also are important are user interface displays and layouts. They may impact clinical workflow. So again, it depends on where in the workflow of a patient is your software. Does it directly impact an ongoing surgery or does it not? Will matter a lot for how the user interface is interpreted for usability and GSPR1. Always remember that GSPR1 and 8 are always required to be covered under clinical evaluation assessment. You may choose to add others. And I want to make a brief joke and note about artificial intelligence. I hope you all appreciate that I chose an image generated by artificial intelligence that's all messed up. That's on purpose. That's not an accident. Artificial intelligence isn't always right. I've reviewed many of them, and I will say to you, it is neither artificial nor is it intelligent. It can be sort of intelligent in a really narrow band. So let's talk very briefly about artificial intelligence. First, you must inform your notified body if there's artificial intelligence. That includes, if you read the AI Act, devices that are trained by AI. So they may be static now, but they were trained by one. That falls under the AI Act, and we do need to know. Be aware that for the time being, self-learning AI, which is released to the market and falls under Rule 22, is a very complex question. At the moment, it's not being covered under the AI Act. Equivalence is almost impossible once an artificial intelligence is present. The exact same software trained on the exact same data set with the exact same validation runs will not be the exact same software, even if you use the same training model. Therefore, equivalence is almost off the table once AI is present. Data and training sets, sorry for the typo. If AI is present, your notified body is going to question in depth how the software was trained, how the training sets represent the claims, functions, and user base and patient base. Is it taking into account all the user groups, all the cross sections of the user groups, the patient groups, the conditions, and are every single one of those statistically viable? And do they represent one another if you choose to leverage them? And just like your training sets must have all that, so too must your reserved validation sets, along with our understanding for how often are you running that validation set. So again, please read the AIA. That is the Artificial Intelligence Act. It implements data governance and management practices. And again, AIs which continue to learn post-market are going to require a predetermined change plan. There's currently no EU guidance on it. IMDRF is generating it. So again, not much on AI today. I just wanted to kind of point out that it is a big question, and a lot of people use it, and we do need to know about it. This is just a brief series on the SGS Academy, so you can find your way to us for additional MDR courses. And yeah, please subscribe. And now I am more than happy to take any questions from anyone about anything, if there are any.
Please feel free to ask. It's not every day we have expertise at your disposal like this, and please take advantage. All right. No questions, Kevin. You did a great job. That's what that means.
Okay, I'll take that as that. So again, when you are preparing your documentation, because as I remember, everyone in this meeting is either working on or nearly done with your MDR submission. So keep all of these things in mind. Will the slides be shared afterwards? I don't know.
So if we go, I'm going to move the slide back here just one. Just so you know, we do re-upload the webinars, so you will be able to see this whole thing again. If you scan that QR code there, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel where we do post all of these. And I will make sure if you'd like the slides, I'll make sure you get them. No problem. Got your inquiry. We have one more coming. And while we're waiting for any more questions to come in, please take a look on the right-hand side. There will be a survey. If you could fill that out, we really appreciate your feedback. It helps guide future webinars. It helps guide future topics. We'd love to learn a little bit more about how you feel about what we're doing here. So please go ahead and fill out that survey if you don't mind.
Yes, we want to answer what you want answered. All right, under the EU MDR, how is borderline determined between software that merely displays and software that qualifies as SaMD? So this really gets back to that question earlier of the example we had on screen of, let's take a nurse's station. That's a fairly common software as a medical device where data from, say, 10 to 20 rooms are aggregated and then shown in one location at a nurse's station. Certainly in America, I've never been in a hospital in Europe, thankfully. I've only ever been in a hospital in America and China, so I don't have personal experience. But in America, it's very, very common. Most floors are situated in a ring or in a full circle around a central nurse's station. So you don't need a nurse to walk from room to room. They can look at a series of monitors and it tells you what is happening in every room on every monitor. So that question now, right? What is the software that's doing that? Is it a medical device or is it merely displaying data from another medical device? I have had the experience of both. I have had ones that make absolutely no claims, and I've had ones that do. So we always start running into this problem if a device type is very common, and almost all of the devices in the world for that device type make a medical claim and say reduction in time to treatment, which really is what that nurse's station is for. They have easy eyes on and they can see if something, you hear a vague alarm somewhere in the corner, then they can look over and they see a flashing red. It's got an indicator. Now that example I'm giving, there's additional processing. It's giving a specific alert. It's giving a specific alarm and it's saying, go pay attention to this. It's important. That's a great example where we know for a fact it's doing additional processing. Definitely a medical device, definitely SaMD. Blindly displaying without additional alarm what's going on in other rooms with no claims starts to be probably not a medical device of its own accord. Depending on who makes it, it might be an accessory to one of the other devices. So it really is very borderline therapeutic intent is the word that you used, and therapeutic intent is important. So what the indication for use and intended purpose are is ultimately going to determine what the notified body decides to do with it. All right.
Excellent.
Any others? If they come to you later, you are more than welcome to ask us. We will try our best to answer them externally.
Yes, you can always email Kevin or myself. We're always happy to guide as best we can.
And our time is technically up, so no one is beholden to stay longer than they will. Everyone has work, I'm sure. So thank you for coming. I wish you all a wonderful morning and afternoon or evening, depending upon where you may be. And we look forward to hearing from you again. Have a great afternoon.